Hi, my name is Muhammad Mirza Irfan bin Mazli and we're from Group E. So now we will discuss the issues regarding Adam and Suhaimin and between Adam and Yuna. So now I will introduce my fellow groupmate, which consists of me, myself, my friend Kavin, Kiganesh Lingam, Divya, Jasrina and Miyoko. So for the first issue in regards of Adam and Suhaimin, we will discuss by my fellow groupmate, which is Kavin and Kiganesh Lingam. For the second issue, which arises between Adam and Yuna, we will discuss by Jasrina and Divya. And for the last part, which is the conclusion, we will explain by Miyoko. So now I will pass to my fellow groupmate, which is Kavin, to explain the first issue, law and application for the first issue.
Okay. Thank you, Mirza, for passing up the presentation to me. And hi, Miss. Today I'm going to be presenting about my issue, which is whether Adam's promise to pay around 500,000 to Suhaimin constitutes a valid and enforceable contract, or whether Suhaimin's failure to disclose a prior engagement could render the consideration inadequate. So, as for the law, under Section 2D of the Contracts Act 1950, consideration is defined as something of value exchanged between parties of a contract, which may include an act, abstinence, or even a promise. Adam's promise to pay RM 500,000 is the promise, while Suhaimin's act of marrying Sri Devin is the consideration. However, since Suhaimin is already engaged to Sri Devin, the whole question of like this act of marrying her does not constitute a fresh consideration, as he's already about to marry her and he's already under a pre-existing obligation to marry her. And this raises the issue of whether the consideration is adequate or illusory, which could potentially render the contract void due to the lack of valid consideration. For a contract to be valid under Section 10, subsection 1, it must be made by the free consent of parties competent for contract for lawful consideration and with a lawful object. If Suhaimin was already obligated to marry Sri Devin, then his act of marrying her might not satisfy the requirement of a lawful consideration, as it would be considered as a pre-existing duty rather than taking up something new and also valuable. This could mean that the contract is void due to inadequate and also insufficient consideration. Additionally, Section 25 stipulates that if any part of the consideration is unlawful, the entire agreement becomes void. While there is no indication that the consideration itself is unlawful, the adequacy of the consideration remains in question, and if any part of the agreement involves unlawful conduct such as fraud, then the contract would be void. And the issue of whether the agreement is unlawful is further explored under sections 24A and also section 24B. And section 24A states that an agreement is void if its consideration or object is expressly prohibited by law. However, there is no indication in this case that the financial arrangement for marriage is expressly prohibited by law. Section 24B addresses situations when an agreement undermines the provisions of any law, and if Adam's arrangement with Suhaimin is seen as circumventing marriage laws or reducing marriage to a mere transactional arrangement, it could potentially fall under this provision. Moreover, Section 24E declares an agreement is void if its consideration or object is considered immoral or opposed to public policy, as it may undermine the sanctity of marriage and also treat it as a commercial transaction. If the court finds that the agreement is against public policy, then it would invalidate the contract under this provision. And in the terms of case law, the principles of Shadwell versus Shadwell are relevant. In that case, the court held that the promise to pay for a marriage, even though the plaintiff was already engaged, constituted that valid consideration, as it conferred to a benefit of the promiser and a detriment to the promisee. Applying these principles to Adam and also Suhaimin's case, it is possible that Suhaimin's marriage could still be a valid consideration despite its pre-existing arrangements, as it involves a new legal obligations. However, this hinges on whether court finds that the object of the contract, offering financial reward for marriage, is lawful and not against public policy. And for the application, Adam's promise to pay RM 500,000 to Suhaimin could potentially form a valid contract provided the consideration is adequate and also lawful. And if Suhaimin was already engaged to Sri Devin, his act of marrying her may be viewed as inadequate and consideration due to his pre-existing obligations, which is the engagement. If the court finds that the consideration is illusory, the contract would be void as it lacked of a valid consideration. And however, if the court finds that the consideration is sufficient, it would still uphold the contract. Additionally, the court will also need to assess whether the financial incentive or the sanctity of the marriage, as if this could render the contract void under Section 24E of the Contracts Act 1950. And in conclusion, while Adam's promise to pay RM 500,000 to Suhaimin could potentially form a valid contract, the court would determine whether the consideration, which is the Suhaimin's marriage, is adequate and also lawful. The failure to disclose this prior engagement may make the consideration illusory, but if it is deemed sufficient, the agreement could still be valid. And furthermore, the court will still need to assess whether the financial incentive or for the marriage which undermines the public policy or the sanctity of the marriage, as this could render the contract void under Section 24E of the Contracts Act 1950. And yeah, that's all from me, and I would like to pass my presentation up to Ki Ganesh Lingam to continue the presentation. That's all from me now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavin. And I'm Ki Ganesh Lingam, and I'm focusing on the part of issues between Adam and Suhaimin, whether there was intention to create legal relation on the action of Adam of giving a gift of Ford Mustang to Suhaimin during his wedding to prove his sincerity. Second, whether the written agreement demonstrates any legally bound intention. Third, whether the gift of Ford Mustang to Suhaimin can be reclaimed by Adam. For the law, I'm using two case laws and one section under Contracts Act 1950. For the case law, first case law, I'm using Khalil and Kabolik Smokeball Company Limited. Second case law, I'm using Kong Kum Sun and Lin Sun Seo and others. Third, I'm using Section 26, Explanation 1 of Contract Act 1950. First, on the issues of giving a gift of Ford Mustang, I am applying the principle laid down in the Khalil and Kabolik Smokeball Company, where on that case, the court held that the action of depositing £1,000 into their bank account to prove their sincerity had amounted to create an intention to be legally bound. Applying that principle to the fact of Adam's sincerity, to gift Ford Mustang to prove sincerity, shows that a clear demonstration of legally bound intention by Adam. Second part, I am applying Kwong Kum Sun and Lim Sun Seo and others, and I am applying the case illustrated that an expression in writing of the arrangements could amount to legally bound intention. I am applying this principle laid down in the case to the fact that Adam and Suhaimin had entered into a written agreement to prove the sincerity and also to enhance the validity of the contract. Applying this, it also clearly demonstrates that Adam's intention to be legally bound. Third, I am applying Section 26, Explanation 1 to the action of Adam of reclaiming the Ford Mustang. Pursuant to Section 26, Explanation 1, it clearly states that a gift actually made cannot be invalidated. A gift actually made refers to a completed gift. A completed gift refers to a gift which has been delivered and accepted. On this case, Adam has provided Ford Mustang as a gift and Suhaimin has accepted the gift. Therefore, the gift was completed. The gift actually made. The action of Adam to reclaim back the Ford Mustang could not be validated under the law, since Section 26 Explanation 1 clearly stated that a completed gift cannot be revoked. In conclusion, applying Khalil Kabolik, the principle demonstrated in Khalil Kabolik smokeball, to the fact that Adam's intention to gift a Ford Mustang to Suhaimin to prove his sincerity has created an intention to be legally bound. Second, applying Kwang Kum Sun and Lim Sun Xiao and others to the fact that Adam and Suhaimin had entered into a written agreement has also demonstrated a clear intention of legally bound. And third, Adam's action of reclaiming the Ford Mustang could not be validated under the law, since Section 26 Explanation 1 clearly stated that a completed gift cannot be revoked. That's all from me. Thank you. I'm passing on to Jesrina for further issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinagesh. My name is Jesrina Kaur here, and I will be discussing regarding the first issue between Yuna and Adam. To start first, the first issue is whether Yuna, as a minor, has the legal capacity to enter into a binding contract with Adam. Under normal circumstances, a minor is called as individuals that is below the age of 18 years old, are generally considered unable to fully enter into a contract. This is because the law in Malaysia consider them like they has a lack of maturity and they will never know what are the consequences of their decisions. And however, there are exceptions, especially when it comes to specific types of agreements like scholarship, which brings us to the next part. So let's move on the law part. So under Section 4 of the Contracts Act 1976 has specifically provides that scholarship agreements is not simply invalidated because the person entering into the agreement is a minor. In other words, even if Yuna was 16 years old, the scholarship agreement she entered into with Adam would still be legally binding. So, to support this argument, there is a key case regarding University of Malaya and Lee Ming Chong case from 1986. So, the court held that a minor, which is the individual who is below the age of 18, still will be bound to the agreements on scholarship contracts, even though Lee was actually underage during that time, during she made the contract with the University of Malaya. So in that contract was Lee Ming Chong have to, when she completes her study, she have to come back and she was bound to work with that university for 5 years. So this is because scholarship agreements are seen as exceptions to the general rule regarding minors and also contracts. So to support this argument, there is a key case regarding University of Malaya and Lee Ming Chong case from 1986. So the court held that a minor, which is the individual who is below the age of 18, still will be bound to the agreements on scholarship contracts, even though Lee was actually underage during that time, during she made the contract with the University of Malaya. So in that contract was Lee Ming Chong have to, when she completes her study, she have to come back and she was bound to work with that university for 5 years. So this is because scholarship agreements are seen as exceptions to the general rule regarding minors and also contracts. Now, applying back to Yuna's case, she was 16 years old when she made the scholarship agreement with Adam. So, this age, 16 years old, falls below the age of majority, which is 18 years old, under the Age of Majority Act 1971. However, because of Section 4 of the Contracts Act 1976 clearly states that scholarship agreements remain valid regardless of the scholar's age. So, that means Yuna's contract with Adams holds up legally here. Just like this also, in the case of University Malaya and Lee Ming Chong, where the court enforced that the scholarship contract despite of the minor's age. So here, back here, Yuna's scholarship agreement, which includes the both educational sponsor and also the service requirement to work for Adam company. So this both is legally binding. So if Yuna refused to honor to commit her work with Adam's company after she completing her studies, that means this shows a breach of contract. If she refused to fulfill the agreement, this could lead to legal consequences as she's actually legally obligated to follow the contract agreement. As conclusion, to conclude now, Yuna's scholarship's agreement with Adam is valid and enforceable even though she is a minor. This is supported by the Section 4 of the Contracts Act 1976 and also the case of University Malaya and Lee Ming Chong case, where the court upheld the enforceability of a scholarship contract with a minor. As a result, Yuna is legally bound to fulfill her commitment to work with Adam's company.
Thank you, Jasrina. So moving on to the last issue, which is whether Yuna, who is the third party of an agreement made between Adam and Suhaiman, can take legal action against Adam based on the promises made to Suhaiman. So we can look into the case of Tweedle and Atkinson. So in this case, basically the plaintiff's father and father-in-law promised to pay him money, but when one of the father refused to pay the money, the plaintiff tried to sue, and then the court held that he is not allowed to sue because he is not a party of the contract and he did not provide any consideration, so he is not entitled to enforce the agreement. So the principle in this case is a person who is not a party of a contract could not enforce an agreement even if the contract was made for their benefit. Yuna was not a party to the agreement made between Adam and Suhaiman, which outlined the 500,000 ringgit and related arrangements. So under the principle provided in the case of Tweedle and Atkinson, Yuna cannot enforce the agreement between Adam and Suhaiman. In Tweedle, a plaintiff could not claim money promised in a contract between their father and father-in-law because they did not provide any consideration and were not privy to the agreement. So just as the groom in Tweedle was not a party to the agreement made between the father and the William Guy, Yuna is not a party to the agreement made between Adam and Suhaiman too. Because Yuna did not personally make the contract with Adam, she cannot enforce it unless an exception applies. So in conclusion, Yuna, as a third party to the agreement made between Adam and Suhaiman, does not have the right to enforce the promises made in the contract. So in contract law, only a person who is directly involved in an agreement can typically seek to enforce it. Since Yuna was not part of the contract made between Adam and Suhaiman and did not contribute any consideration, she lacks the legal capacity to initiate legal action based on the promises made in that contract unless an exception to the rule applies. Thank you, and I would like to pass it to the next person.
Thank you, Lilia. My name is Miyoko. Now I'm going to summarize our analysis on the question. So the 500,000 promised to Suhaimin. First, we have Adam promised to pay 500,000 to Suhaimin, contingent on his marriage to Seri Dewin. Adam formalized this with a car key and a written agreement, which could indicate a valid contract. However, if this was intended as a familiar gesture with no legal intent, Suhaimin may struggle to enforce the promise legally. Moving on to Yuna, Adam agreed to sponsor her education in exchange for her commitment to work in his company upon completion. Yuna's agreement was formalized through her guidance. Suhaimin, however, after studying abroad in French, Yuna chose not to return to work for Adam, citing the financial instability. This may constitute a breach of contract unless she can prove there were grounds for rescission, such as the misrepresentation or under influence at the time of signing. Adam's best course of action would be to renegotiate with both Suhaimin and Yuna. For Suhaimin, Adam could restructure the terms of the 500,000 payment or offer alternative compensation. For Yuna, he could address her concern by offering a severance package or allowing her to work remotely. It's also essential for Suhaimin and Yuna to understand their rights and obligations better. Yuna, in particularly, might explore options to modify or terminate the contract, especially considering her age and the company's current financial situation. To sum up, the enforceability of the agreements between the Adam, Suhaimin, and Yuna depends on the intent behind each contract. Legal counsel will be crucial in resolving these disputes, and Adam may need to renegotiate terms to avoid further legal complications. Thank you.